Awesome. The speaker today is me. And so I'm going to do a really cool demo of building a DevOps pipeline, a CI/CD pipeline. We're going to build one for a .NET Framework app. We'll build one for a .NET Core app. We'll build one for databases, getting database changes from developers into dev and test databases. And then we'll go the other direction of getting production data into developers' hands. So look, Ma, no slides. So here's my slide deck. That's all. DevOps pipeline for .NET apps. A little bit about me. If you go to robrich.org and click on About Me, then you'll see this page. And so some of the things that I've done, I'm a Microsoft MVP, a friend of Redgate. AZ GiveCamp is really cool. AZ GiveCamp brings volunteer developers together with charities who otherwise couldn't afford software services. We start building software for them Friday after work. Sunday afternoon, we deliver completed software back to the charities. And then we have this great closing ceremony, a no-prize hackathon, where we get to just gush about how wonderful the projects we built are and how their companies' lives will change forever. It's really cool. So join us for that in March. Some of the other things that I've done, I do Git training with GitGrit, gitgrit.com. My company is a Microsoft partner. One of the things I'm particularly proud of is I replied to a .NET Rocks episode, their podcast. They read it on the air, and they sent me a mug. Woohoo! So let's dig into a DevOps pipeline. So I have here a fresh install of TeamCity, and I have installed the Redgate and Octopus Deploy plugins, and a fresh install of Octopus Deploy, where I've also installed the Redgate plugins. But let's start by building an application. Here's Visual Studio. File, New, Project. And I'm going to pick a web application. I'm going to put this into a folder called SoutheastValley.NET User Group, Net Framework, and we'll call this SoutheastValley.NET User Group, Net Framework. So this is a .NET Framework one. We're going to use .NET Framework 4.61, and I'll also add unit tests. I don't have any authentication, and I've chosen MVC. So this is just as vanilla as you get. Here's a blank web project. Here's the part where I download all of the NuGet packages. Wi-Fi being what it is. But I wanted to very specifically start with nothing. So let's pop open this project into the layout page. And we'll change the application name from application name to SoutheastValley.NET User Group. Build that solution. And now let's go check that in. So we already have a .git folder. It already did that initial commit. And we have the git ignore so that we're not checking in bin and obj and things like that. Git status. Here's that one modified file. Git add, git commit -m, change title. OK, git remote. So now we don't have a server. We could reach out to Visual Studio Team Services, or we could reach out to GitHub or GitLab. In this case, I have this server, just a local repository, because internet being a thing. And let's create a new repository, and we'll call this net framework. And here in this repository, we're going to say git init --bear to create a server repository. And now I'll grab this, and that will be my remote URL. Git remote add origin, and I'm going to give it that URL. Git push origin master. So now I've uploaded that into my repository, and let's start building that DevOps pipeline. I'm going to create a new project, and I could choose from a repository URL, in which case it would automatically figure out the type of repository, and away we go. But I'm going to choose manually. It'll be the Southeast Valley.NET User Group Net Framework project. And then inside this project, I will create a build configuration. Again, I'll choose manually. If I had chosen the GitHub URL, it would have figured this out automatically. But I'll give that the net framework, and I will call it, I will create that project. How would I like to attach it to my version control? I'll choose Git, and I'll give it this name, and then I'll give it that fetch URL. Now I can go in here and give it advanced options like I would only like to build master, or I would only like to build particular branches. In this case, I'll build every branch. I like to see author name and email rather than just author user ID. And I will create that repository. So now that I've gotten my build connected to the repository, let's create some build steps associated with this. So I would like to add a build step. This will be a Visual Studio build. So given that Visual Studio build, I can ask for the solution path. Now I could go try and figure out, where in that repository is this solution. But because I've pushed this repository up to my Git server and TeamCity's already pulled it down, I can come in here and I can ask TeamCity which files would I like to build. And I'll pick this one, and it populates the details for me. So I don't have to type in stuff. That's really cool. I'm going to choose to rebuild. I'm going to choose the configuration of release, and I will save. Next step, we'd like to run some unit tests. So let's come in here and let's add to this test project XUnit. Now I'm going to grab XUnit and install that over MS Test. I could run an MS Test as well, but in this case we'll use XUnit. And I'm also going to look for XUnit runner. Now the XUnit runner Visual Studio is the one that will light up the test explorer inside Visual Studio. That's perfect. Now I can open up the test window and I can say run tests. But I'm also going to look for the XUnit runner console and install that package. Now when I have the XUnit runner console package, I then have inside my packages folder, inside the XUnit runner console folder, I have this XUnit console.exe. That's the path that I'm going to need to be able to run my unit tests. So I'll save that. Oh, let's flip our tests over to use XUnit rather than MS Test. So let's pull MS Test. This will be fact. This will be fact. This will be, let's pull in the XUnit namespace. Remove the is and are. Oh, there's one more fact. And now we have XUnit tests. So now I can go inside Test, Windows, Test Explorer, and we see that Visual Studio integration where I can choose Run All, and it will go run all of those tests. In this case, it's discovered 3 tests, and I can run them here inside Visual Studio. If I choose to, I can turn them all on all the time. That button isn't lighting up. There's a button that I can click on to be able to run them all the time, which is really cool. So I've got those tests in place. Let's come back into TeamCity, and let's add that XUnit run, XUnit test run. So I'll choose XUnit tests. I'll give it an executable with parameters. So it's net461 xunit.console.exe, and the parameters I'll give it these parameters. Now this one is the Southeast Valley.NET user group net framework .test/bin/release. I'll use this as the DLL name. And then here I've said -NUnit, which says write the test results in NUnit format. And I've given it this path to write that test results in. We'll use that to be able to pull that back into TeamCity to be able to see the test results in a really elegant way. If I just ran XUnit console passing in this DLL, it would just write those results to the console. Either way, it's going to execute those tests, return 0 for success and non-0 for failure. That non-0 will fail the build. So I'll choose to save. And then we want to do one more step. As part of a .NET build, we'll need to do NuGet restore. We'll need to pull down those NuGet packages. So let's do NuGet restore. NuGet restore. And now we have our 3 steps. Well, we want to NuGet restore before we build. So let's reorder those steps and pull NuGet restore first. There we go. So now we'll NuGet restore. We'll do a Visual Studio build in release mode, and then we'll run our XUnit tests against that release DLL. Any questions so far? Seems like more than 3 steps that this build is doing? Yeah. So we want to add a trigger. This trigger will tell us when we kick off this build. In this case, we would like a VCS trigger. When I commit to Git, I want Git to automatically kick off a build. Now we could use webhooks inside GitHub to automatically tell TeamCity to do things, which is interesting. In this case, we'll ask TeamCity to go reach into our Git repository to tell us to do stuff. This quiet period is really interesting. If we have a developer who likes to commit and push, and then commit and push, and they'll usually do that 4 or 5 times, and then we end up with like 5 or 6 builds waiting to go, and now I can't do anything because that's the quiet period. We can say, let's wait a certain amount of time, and then kick off that final build. In this case, I'm not going to use a quiet period, but we could set that to, I don't know, a minute, 5 minutes, 10 seconds. How long does it take that person to finish doing all the things? We have that VCS trigger then. Build features. We wrote that test result file to the XML file. Let's go pull that in. We'll use XML report processing, and we'll choose NUnit. The reason that we said -NUnit rather than -XUnit is because XUnit isn't in this list, but NUnit is. So let's say NUnit, and we will say star.test.xml as our output path. And we'll choose star.test.xml so that if we add any more steps that build other unit test projects, we'll be able to pull in those tests automatically without changing this step. Save. Double check the cheat sheet. And we're ready to go. So we've got this build all set. Back here in Git status, we see that we have those changes to our tests. Git add all the things, git commit -m, add XUnit, git push origin master. Now we've pushed back here in TeamCity, we'll see that there is one pending build. And because we've kicked off that VCS trigger, it takes it a second. The agent lit up. And now it kicks off the build automatically. I did a git push, and it kicked off our build. This is really cool. Inside the TeamCity build results, we can dig into this content. We see interesting stuff. It was triggered by Git on this date. Here's the agent that it's running on if we happen to have multiple build machines. Here's the details associated with that. Here in the changes section, I see here's the Git changes that led to this build. So I can see, here are the 4 files that changed. And if I want to, I can rig this to link up to my source control system. Here's the name of the person who committed. Build log is particularly interesting. This is all of the details associated with that build. And I see in this case, it built it did the NuGet restore, it did the Visual Studio build, and XUnit failed. File not found. Release net frameworks test DLL. OK, so I named that badly. Yep, that build failed. We're looking at the build results. We'll see up here that it failed as well. But let's go figure out where that build. Net framework, tests, bin, release. I bet I named this wrong. Let's go back into our build. And if that's our only build fail, that's going to be pretty amazing. Build steps, XUnit tests. I did spell it wrong. Cool. So let's kick off another build. Yep. This one says that this failed, and it'll tell us why it failed, which is pretty cool. Let's dig back into this build log. And I love watching this. If we stay up at the top, it will just show us what we have. But if we scroll down, and this build finished super quick, so we didn't get to see it, then we can actually look at the results. And popping open into each step, we can see the particulars of the build at that step. So for example, here's our XUnit test run, and it went and collected all the tests, and it ran the tests, and it got the results. And so now we have a green build. Here's our green build. We see that 6 tests passed. If we click into it, we now have a new tab called Tests that shows us those test results. So here's the tests and how long each one took and which one it ran, and it looks like it's counting them twice. That's an interesting bug. But we've got then the test results doing really interesting things. Any questions so far?
How did you get the result without looking at it?
How did I get the result?
Did you get that communication? Did you get text or did you get email? If it's successful or failed?
There's a couple of ways that we can do it. And what's really interesting, when I come in here to administration, it keeps telling me, hook up to the email server so that it can send emails when it happens. And it totally depends on your preference, how you'd like to communicate those results. Would you like an email? Would you like a text? You can also pull up this dashboard. You can have things that will pop up notifications. You can have a system tray that will pop up and say, hey, the build failed or the build succeeded. And that's kind of interesting. Yes, the email will have the results of the build and links back into the build results so you can get straight to this page. I generally like to pull these results rather than having them pushed to me. And so I'll generally just have this page, watch this page as I build things.
Or you can have it report to GitHub as a status to regular status.
Right. I could definitely have it report to GitHub. That would be perfect. So we've got the CI part. We've got the continuous integration part. Now let's deploy it. So I have here IIS. I have no application pools. I have no sites. Let's get this application to deploy to IIS. Let's pop open Octopus Deploy. And our first step, I love this wizard, create your first environment. Let's create an environment. And I will create a dev environment.
Is this your PC?
Yes.
Everything's local?
Everything's local for now, but we could definitely craft other servers. And that's exactly what we'll do next, add deployment target. Now they call it deployment target, but what they're really saying is server. But in the case where the server is Azure or Kubernetes or some other place, it's not necessarily a server, but we're going to choose a Windows server. Once I've chosen a Windows server, it says, how would you like to connect to it? A listening tentacle is where this Octopus server will go reach out to that thing and push updates. That's great if Octopus can make connections to it. If that machine is firewalled, we could have a polling tentacle where that machine reached into Octopus and pulled for changes. And we could also have other things like the offline package drop where it just kind of sets something there and waits for things to happen, or we could deploy in other ways. I'm going to choose a listening tentacle. That's generally faster because it can actually go trigger things. And I'm going to enter the host name. In this case, I'm going to say localhost, but I could also say machine dev or wherever I want this to go. Localhost. Localhost. Next. And what would I like to name this? I'll say dev localhost. Now this machine is in the dev environment, and I can give it some roles. I'll say this is part of the web role. Now this is just a list that I gave it. I want to designate these are the web servers, these are the database servers, maybe these are the API servers, and these are the front-end servers. I can kind of group them so that when I say, hey, I want to deploy this to all the web servers, it will just deploy it to all the web servers. I just subscribed this to web servers. This is really cool. Here's the thumbprint that I expect that tentacle to have. As I installed the tentacle application, it said, here's my thumbprint. And Octopus read it in, so I can match that that's the self-signed certificate there. Here's the self-signed certificate of the Octopus server. They're both self-signed certificates, but it's not using a trust chain to verify them. It's using the actual certificate thumbprints. So we don't need to buy certificates, but we know that this communication is encrypted both ways. So I'll match those certificates to what I expect, and then I'll save that tentacle. Let's do that again. Let's come in here and create an environment. We'll add this environment and call it test. We'll add a deployment target that is a Windows box. That will be a listening tentacle. And we will give it the host name of localhost. Next, we will call this test localhost. It's in the test environment. We'll also subscribe it to the web role so that websites in dev will deploy to the dev web servers, and the websites in test will deploy to the test web servers. And then save. We've created our environments. As I click here in infrastructure, I see the two environments, the dev and test, and I see two listening tentacles, the dev listening tentacle and the test listening tentacle. Well, in this case, because they're on the machine, they're actually the same executable running on that one, but that's perfect. I also see that I have web roles.
Which application is this one?
This is Octopus Deploy.
Octopus Deploy.
Yep. So tell Octopus where to deploy your software. Done. Awesome.
I got a question.
Yep.
So sometimes, you don't have any errors, everything goes fine, but there's something wrong. How do you reverse the outcome?
That's really cool. How do I know what went wrong when things go wrong? That's a great question. Ask me again as we kick off this build. We want to upload a package. So let's go grab this package. Now this is a NuGet package, kind of like Chocolatey. Octopus Deploy uses NuGet not as a software packaging format, but rather just as a package, and it adds a manifest to it. So back inside Visual Studio, I'm going to manage packages on the web application, and I'm going to browse for OctoPack. Now, OctoPack will do some really, really cool things. It will generate this NuGet package, but it'll generate it before it transforms the web configs. So baked into that NuGet package is web.config, web.dev.config, web.release.config, and if I choose to make them, web.dev.config, web.test.config, web.staging.config, web.production.config, all of the environment names that I have. It'll bake those configs into this NuGet package and allow me then to transform those configs as I deploy it to the target server.
I think this is faster, right? Instead of every server does, you download one time the packages and shift it to
Right.
your deployment.
Yeah, the other methodology is every time I want to deploy to a new environment, I rebuild the everything. This way, I have one NuGet package, one Octopus deploy package that I just send to every environment. And that's really cool. So I've got that OctoPack package installed. Back here in TeamCity, I'm going to get TeamCity to run that packaging step. Let's go into administration. Let's go into our project, edit, build steps. I'm going to add a new build step, and this will be, I have installed the Octopus packages, the Octopus plugins for TeamCity, and so I could just choose these, which is interesting. But let's run a command line first, or instead, and we'll say this is Octo. Oh, oops, I forgot a step. Build steps, Visual Studio Build. I want it to build the NuGet package. So because I have that Octopus plugin into TeamCity, I have this OctoPack checkbox. What's the package version? Well, I would like to use the build number. The build number will get baked into my DLLs, it'll get baked into the NuGet package, and I can use that as my atomic release number. Well, these are usually 1.0.7, 2.0.6, so that build number is great. But right now, my build numbers are 1, 2. So let's come back in here to General Settings, and let's change the build number format. I'm going to say 1.0. Build counter. Now that's not quite semantic versioning, but it's close. We can pretend, we can squint real hard and see that as semantic versioning. So right now I have 1.0.2. The next build will be 1.0.3, and that'll increment every time. 1.0.4, 1.0.5.
So is this build number your version number, or you have version number and build number?
This is the version number. I'm misusing the build number as the version number.
Some of them puts like a date and time.
Right.
Date time, they put like date time and a build number. And some of them puts just build number you're doing.
Yeah, it would be really cool to bake in the date time that it was built. It could be really cool to also bake in the Git hash, maybe the commit message. There's lots of really cool metadata that we could include in this, and that would be really, really cool to do.
You can just do over there the same place, so you can add date there.
I could add date to the build number format and say, build date. Yeah. But that would actually change my version number and my NuGet package number. And so probably what I'll want to look to instead is the assembly informational version. Here's assembly version and assembly file version. But I would say let's look to.
If they are not automatically updated, how you can update your assembly version also without manually typing?
Yeah. These ones we can automatically update by saying 1.0. And the really cool thing is that then uses date time, so we can kind of extract the build date from that. But this is just a string. So what I'll often do is I'll add a build step before my other build steps that'll go use PowerShell to change the contents of this file, change that. So I'll say something like git version. And then my PowerShell script will go look for the word git version and substitute it with the actual git hash.
Is it possible to capture it and send that?
Is it possible to what?
Capture, screenshot, and send that?
To screenshot this?
Yeah. Check what I was looking for.
There you go. Yeah, that was cool. Assembly informational version can be really, really powerful.
Yeah, it's also the one that NuGet uses if it finds it.
Yes. So I'm going to save this. I've now set my build number format to be 1.0 build counter. So here in the build steps, as it builds this Octopus deploy package, it will use 1.0 build number to kick that off as well. Yep.
Can you have that build number be just to go extract it from the assembly info file, or one of them?
I can. It's a little bit funky to do that, to just go extract it from the file. The reason for that is that this is an environment variable. And so I can go yank into those environment variables and override it. I would override build underscore number, or you know,
So
in a previous step I would set it, and in a subsequent step I would read it. Yeah.
okay, so in the pre-build events, you could go and modify that environment variable, stick the appropriate date-based version number in there, and it would pull down that and use it. Cool.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I could go reach into wherever, go pull the next one, increment it, and stuff it in all the places.
Do you have these like PowerPoint templates after the meeting?
Do I have slides?
Yeah.
I do not have slides. Woohoo!
How are we going to get it there?
How are you going to get it?
Yeah.
Take pictures.
I have a question about your build server. You said a little while ago you've got everything running locally.
Yes.
So earlier you're using a build server called CIDemo. Is that
CI demo is the name of my machine.
And you're running all these in Docker, right?
These aren't using Docker. This is a virtual machine, but that's an implementation detail. Okay, so we've got that NuGet package, that Octopus package, and now we want to send that Octopus package into Octopus Deploy. We want to upload our package. So let's add a build step, and this will be a command line. We will say octo push, and we will go grab this executable with parameters, octo.exe. I happen to download octo.exe from the Octopus Deploy website and just put it in my path so that I'd have that available. And I'm going to push the package named, I'm going to copy it this time so that I don't screw it up. The other copy. Push the package in this directory /obj/octopact/ there's that application /build number. So it's going to go grab that 1.0 whatever it is, new package, replace existing, and then upload it to the server. That just happens to be the URL of my Octopus server. And it's going to authenticate with this OctoKey. OctoKey. So let's create this OctoKey that can connect the two servers together. Inside Octopus, I'm going to say configuration. I'm going to choose more. I'm going to say users. And I will add a new user. And this user will be TeamCity. The display name TeamCity. And I will say, yes, this is a service account. And by choosing a service account, it can't log into this portal. It can only use the API. I'll save that. And then user roles. No, that's not it. Users, TeamCity. Permissions. Here's the part where I always forget it.
Up to?
Test permissions. Test permissions is interesting. I can validate that it can't do stuff. User roles, system administrator.
Somehow there is a lot
That's all the things it can do.
too many steps.
Ah, I'm going to fail that one. So Team City, API keys. So instead of using the Team City user, I'm going to use my user because I'm going to cheat. Profile. Do I not have API keys? No, I don't. Oh, my API keys. New API key, and I'm going to say Team City. Here is this key. So here's that key that Team City will use to authenticate to Octopus Deploy. I'm going to copy that to the clipboard. Let me save this step. Yep, I'm not done with that one. And I will come in here not to this project, but rather to the root project to add that OctoKey. So I'm going to come in here to profiles, or to parameters, add new parameter. This will be called OctoKey. Did I spell that right? Yes, OctoKey. I'm going to call it a configuration parameter. Here's that value. Its type will be hidden. I'm going to make it read-only, so environment variables can't override it later. And I'm going to choose to make it a password. By calling it a password, I can't pull it back out. By calling it hidden, it will go find that string in the logs and replace it so I won't see it in the logs as well. Save, save, close, and that key is gone. I cannot recover it anymore. Creating one is easy, so I can go override it if I need to, but I can't get to it here, nor can I get to it here. It's securely saved in both places. So I now have that OctoKey that I can use to use that. And because I passed it in as a configuration parameter in the root project, then all projects will be able to get to it. As we build other builds, we can do interesting things with it as well. And now it's going to say, hey, those parameters are fine. We've got that build step that will now push that content into Octopus. And now let's create another build step that will actually kick off the release and send it to the dev servers. We'll call this Octo Deploy. It's an executable. Octo.exe, create release, and we're going to call this the Southeast Valley.NET User Group Net Framework project. It'll pass in the build number. It'll deploy to the dev servers. It's going to wait for the deployment. So Team City will sit here waiting until Octopus says it's successful or failed, and it's going to authenticate with that OctoKey. Save. So now it's going to try and kick off this Southeast Valley.NET User Group Net Framework project here in Octopus. Let's go create that project so that we can tell it what to do. Here's that project name. And now with that project, we can define what those, what the tasks it should do should be. Add a deployment step, add a step, and we have then a bunch of different things that we could do. Run an Azure PowerShell script, deploy a Docker container, do all kinds of interesting things. In this case, what we're after is this one right here up top, deploy to IIS. So we'll pick that. And I would like to say deploy publish site to IIS. So Octopus was going to go push it to all of the servers associated with this. What role? I would like it to deploy to the web role servers. Remember when we created the environment, we created those targets that were the web role.
So you're saying if you have like load balance servers, you can push at the same time more than one?
Yes. If I had more than one deployment target, I would exactly do that. I would say, hey, deploy to all the web servers, and it would deploy to all the servers.
What happens like if it's failed? Can we reverse the last field or not?
Can I roll it back?
Yeah.
That is a good move. I believe so. Here for the package ID, it will be, by default, the name of the project. So I'm going to grab the name of the project, and I will push that into place. Here's where I'm running XML transforms. I do the star.release.config and the star.environmentName.config. So I'll go grab web.dev.config. And I'm grabbing all of this out of the NuGet package. In Visual Studio, when we said I would like to install OctoPack, and then in TeamCity, when we built that package, it included all of these configs into that NuGet package, so that as I publish it to all of those target servers, I can do these transforms. I can also do some additional transforms that I'd like as well. And what's really cool, I can also do transforms in JSON files as well. So now let's go set up all of the things that we would like to do for IIS. I'll make it an IIS website as opposed to a virtual directory. The website name, well, I would like this to be SoutheastValley.NET User Group, Net Framework, Dev. And in test, I would like it to be test. But we're defining one set of steps for all of the servers. So I'm going to replace this with environment.name. And so now it will sub in dev or test or whatever it needs to be at each step, which is really cool. I can choose a path under there if I have nested folders. In this case, it's in the root website, which is really cool. The application pool name, I'll want to do that as well. SoutheastValley.NET User Group Framework. And I will say environment name. So the application pool will now get that as well. I can set the CLR version. 4.0 is perfect. The application pool identity, we're basically picking all of the things that we would change inside of IIS. Now here's the protocol. If I was deploying this to different servers for each one, then 80 would be OK. But as it is, I don't want both of them installed on port 80. So let's go change this. Instead of 80, I would like 8,000 plus something. So let's put dev on 8,000 and test on 8,001. Well, to do that, I'm going to come in here and I'm going to say environment.sortOrder. So dev happens to be sort order 0. What? Yes, I did drop a 0. So dev is 0 and test is 1. So this will be 8000, and test will be 8001 for test. What I would love to be able to do is that. Octopus doesn't do math. I could create a separate script where I handed it both things and it did the math. Nah. So there's 8000 and 8001. OK. I would like to enable anonymous authentication, disable Windows authentication. And here in configure features, I could go then say, I would like to convert JSON values or other values as well. In this case, I don't have any, so I'm all set. Here's the build steps then that happen when we publish a website inside Octopus Deploy. It's going to go set up that IIS website. It will set up the application pool. It will set up all of the bindings and ports and other things that we've built inside of IIS. So now we've got this Octopus Deploy step, and because it will wait for deployment, it's going to either go green or red depending on how that Octopus thing goes. So whether Octopus succeeds or fails will determine whether our build succeeds or fails. By the time I get a green TeamCity build, I know that my deployment worked. Awesome. Build. Git status. We see that there's the Octopus Deploy details that we changed. Git add dot, git commit -m, add OctoPack, git push origin master. OK. So now TeamCity will take a minute to notice those changes got pushed. There's that pending change. We're now in that quiet period, which should be, as long as it takes the agent to wake up. Of course, we're going to pause the virtual machine. There's that build. It is running. I love how it keeps with the current step, but then it will collapse the previous steps as it finishes them.
So what if the other one comes at the moment? Trying to go and change the next one.
What if the next one comes into place? If another change gets pushed to the server at the same time? Then it will go look for an available agent. If it finds an available agent, it'll kick off that build in parallel. Because I only have one build agent in this system, it would wait.
When you have two developers, they just, you don't know which one to push.
Yeah. So I pushed that Octopus deploy package, and now we can kick over here to this Octopus dashboard, and we see the Octopus deploy is in process as well. 1.0.3, here's the task summary where it's just kind of noting the things that it's doing. Or I can flip over to the task log where it'll show me the details. Ooh, congratulations, we deployed successfully. That's awesome. Let me close it. It will then show us the details here in this task log view, or we can click on raw, where it will actually show us the raw console output that it did, which is pretty cool.
Let's say we have a three project, database, web API, and a single page application, React or Angular. How can I push individually?
That's a good question. How would I push that if I had 3 different microservices? It depends. I could have one build that deployed all 3, or I could have different builds for each one. Let's come back to that, because that'll be a great question. What if I have many things? What we saw then is that this deployment went great. The TeamCity build finished correctly, and we have a green build. And now here in IIS, we have the dev application pool. We have the test application pool. It's bound to port 8000. So if I fire this up, it's going to JIT once. Here's our website. There's the Southeast Valley.NET user group website that we just built in Visual Studio, deployed to our dev environment. That was pretty cool. So it automatically deployed to dev. Let's get it into test.
Is it possible to use the same script to modify the other one? I have too many configurations going on.
Yeah, good question. How do I get this to deploy to that next environment too? We'll use that same process. This process was defined for all of the, it was agnostic to which environment. So let's come in here to this release, 1.0.3, and we'll click deploy to test. Now when we deploy to test, I'll click deploy, we get that same deployment experience. Here's that task, here's the task log. I can go do interesting things, or what's really fun, to watch the spinny thing here on the dashboard. And now it's deploying 1.0.3 to test. Now you notice we didn't kick off a Visual Studio build to do this. We didn't do any TeamCity content. That package, along with whatever configuration details we wanted, was already in that NuGet package inside Octopus Deploy. It just sent it off to test.
Only the destination is different.
Right. Only the destination's different.
What happens if there is a different configuration?
Yeah. Whatever configuration details I baked into these web.dev.config and web.test.config, it would apply those automatically.
All right, so it's from the web config file
Yep.
or the JSON file.
So I see here in Visual Studio, here's that test application pool. Here's the test website bound to 8001. And let's pop open that page. And here's the site to 8001. So we've got a full framework build. We've done Octopus Deploy to get that content published into place. We've done TeamCity to be able to test and to build, test, and validate our things. And TeamCity waits until the Octopus Deploy deployment is done before it marks this build as green. And then we're able to promote that build from dev to test to QA to staging and ultimately to production if we chose.